To be very honest, if I was a VC, I wouldn't have funded myself. Like that was how bad the presentation was.
To build scale, you have to think scale.
Sometimes I think too much of money restricts innovation. I think that's a sad part.
So destiny finds you on the road that you take to avoid it.
Whenever you get seat on a rocket ship, you don't ask which seat.
We didn't really ask ourselves like too many questions in terms of how big can we get it.
So it was very, very hard to explain what is UGC.
If you want to implement something, first dirty our own hands.
For me, 1 million to 10 million is where scale.
So again, we had basic teams, struggle, but every day was just learning, which was just amazing.
Listen to founders about their stories and how they built their startups. Here on Maharajas of Scale, with me, your host, Krishna Jonakadla, co-founder of Mango Mobile TV and Vouch. Hey everyone, we are back with another exciting episode with Abhishek Poddar of Plum. Abhishek's Plum has been doing a phenomenal job exploiting a gap and a need that has existed for quite some time. Plum sells group insurance for small and medium businesses. It was a hole that was waiting to be plugged, and Abhishek took it up. We are talking to Abhishek on this Thursday afternoon in gloomy Bangalore, where it's been raining for the last literally several months or so. And it's gotten to a point where I don't care about the weather anymore. So, Abhishek, welcome to the show.
Hey, Krishna, thank you so much for having me on the show. Yeah, this time it feels like we are in Seattle. Bangalore is turning into Seattle. It's always gray and it's always raining.
I know. I still remember when I used to be based out of Seattle. This was 18 years ago. And I had another colleague on the East Coast who was based in Buffalo. And our head of consulting at that point in time used to say, I have two of my best team members who are leading two separate practices on either ends of the US with high depression and high suicidal rates. But instead from you guys, all I get is productivity. I don't know how you guys do it. So yeah, it reminds me a lot about Seattle. Awesome.
No, but this weather in Bangalore would never get you suicide. It's only high productivity, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've never had a laziness complex, so I suppose I'll be that way wherever I am. So Abhishek, it's great to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on right now.
Hey, perfect. Yeah, I can give you a quick journey and then why we are building Plum and what we are building, and feel free to stop me. But my journey really started in 2007. I just completed my bachelor's from IIT Kanpur. Back at the IT days, you go through the grunt of which companies are coming on day 0 and the day 1 and the day 2, and where can you get placed first. And I went through that process, was lucky enough to get into consulting, spent the first couple of years at McKinsey. But that was a really good time for me to learn some of the basics of business. I had no clue about how business is done. But I think what I realized was, I have to be much closer to building things rather than telling people what to build. So that's what got me into startups. So the first startup experience was back in 2009. This was a startup in India in tech and media. It's a company called 9.9 Media. Worked there for a couple of years building one of their lines of business. Then went to do my master's at Stanford. Again, I would say not very thoroughly planned. It's because it's a rat race. Everyone that has joined consulting at some point in time, they have to go to B school, and I was in that rat race and went to the B school. But again, very glad that it happened to be a place that I really enjoyed because of the work that I really enjoy, which is building and building startups. I think that way Stanford was a great place to be in the middle of some of the best minds in the world, building some really amazing things, building some really amazing companies. So spent my couple of years doing my master's. Started a company. If you are in the Bay Area and if you haven't started a company, you have done something wrong. That's how people think. So ended up starting a company called RentZeal. We were building an e-commerce marketplace for product rentals. Our thesis was the way eBay has been built. At that time, eBay was a big thing, but the way eBay was built to connect the smaller sellers to the consumers, can there be a similar platform for rentals rather than selling? And our thesis was that the rental as a business has evolved in two verticals. One is housing vertical, and second is car or auto vertical. But there is a whole host of verticals, be it clothing, be it party supplies, be it your adventure equipments. Can we build a platform like eBay for everything other than those two verticals? Did that for a couple of years and figured out, hey, the unit economics isn't working out. That was our first stint of building a company from the scratch on my own. Failed attempt. Ended up joining Google for a few years with this goal that, hey, let's get some real product building experience. And again, amazing experience at Google. Built a couple of products. One was called Google My Business. It was a SME platform and one of the largest SME platforms. We had close to 40 million businesses that was using Google My Business to get a presence on Google and different kinds of products of Google. And second was a payments product called Android Pay. We were launching the newer version of a failed attempt, which was Google Wallet. And I was personally responsible for the tap and pay experience, the NFC-based in-store payments experience. So those were the two products that I worked on. There was always a short-term plan for me that, hey, I'll get some formal product management experience and get back to building companies. So I ended up coming back to India and was building a company called Hypertrack. We were building a location platform for developers who want to build real-time tracking. We started that in India. Eventually realized that US is the right market for what we were building. And my co-founder ended up moving to US. The company ended up moving to the US. And in that transition, I decided that, hey, I've done this back and forth multiple times. I'd made my family uproot themselves multiple times from India to US to India, and I can't do that anymore. And that was my journey into Plum. And that's when I met Saurabh. Saurabh is my co-founder. And we had different ideas in mind of what we want to do. But one of the things that, or maybe two of the things that resonated was, number one, we want to do something that will keep us busy and excited for at least the next 2 decades, if not more. So we have to find a very large, meaningful problem. And this should ideally be something that's the last thing that we do in our life. And number two was we have to do something that is that creates an impact, that creates a legacy. It has to be a large enough problem. And in that mix of things, based on our prior experience and based on some of the research that we did with our customers, that's how we stumbled upon what we are building today, which is Plum. Plum is a group health insurance and employee benefits platform. I'm happy to talk more about that. But that's a short journey of that's my short journey of what I've been up to in the last 15 years and how I ended up building Plum.
That's pretty interesting. You covered a whole arc of life, the last couple of decades, at least close to that, you've gone through. From IIT Kanpur to 9.9 Media and then your Stanford and rents here. Oh, that's amazing. Tell us a little more about the media company. That 2007 was it? Did you say?
2009. This company called 9.9 Media. So our thesis there was in India, all the media companies are going after the masses. The Times of India and the Hindustan Times of the world. And the world will, and India specifically, will evolve into niche media. There will be different kinds of communities that will require very, very targeted content. So think of tech enthusiasts requiring content only on tech. So we had built this property called Digit. Similarly, finance enthusiasts and finance leaders, specifically the CFOs, requiring content on how to manage finances. And we had built a community and a property. And when I say property, this includes a magazine, a website, and events for finance leaders, similarly for the HR leaders, and so on. And we are essentially building this set of properties which are very niche and targeted to very different kinds of communities. What we were very successful at was building this tech community. So Digit ended up being the largest tech community, both in terms of magazine at that time, and now the website and the events, etc., that we do right now. The other communities, what we realized was the size of opportunity as a business is not that large.
Interesting. But today it has metamorphosed into something much, much larger, isn't it? You have, I still remember when we think about media, the most common thing that comes to everybody's mind is film and entertainment. And in film and entertainment, we had a time when you had the likes of Rajshri Productions shoot movies like Hum Saath Saath Hai, and you would think the whole country wants to watch something like Hum Saath Saath Hai. And today we have a situation with the prevalence of OTT platforms. The genres have multiplied. Today, at least during Halloween, we are seeing a lot of horror-related stuff come out. But 10 years later, or maybe almost 10, 12 years later, don't you see that the genres and the segments have actually panned out, mostly because of the prevalence of a different set of tech? So 10 years later, looks like that hypothesis has actually come true. We have all kinds of magazines, we'll have all kinds of media properties. And just like they say about startups, timing is everything.
Timing is everything, but
Okay.
no, I would have to say that I think some of the niche media hypothesis still hasn't played out, to be very honest. From a business sense perspective, it's still not a very profitable business if you are in niche media. One thing that we have realized is unless you are the top two media houses in India, especially when it comes to online and print media, you would never make money. You would never be profitable, because media business is about advertisers, and the advertisers always want to be in the number one or the number two player. They would never go to number three.
We'll come back to Plum in a few minutes. I don't know if you've wondered, Warren Buffett. If you've read about Warren Buffett's investments, one of the things that Warren Buffett did was buy a newspaper in Buffalo. Buffalo is not a very large city. It's, as far as I know, it's not even a tier 2 city. It's literally the equivalent of a tier 3 city in the US. Out near Buffalo is Rochester, New York, and Rochester, New York is home to both Kodak at one point in time, and Kodak was the reigning king of film and photography, and then Citibank. Buffalo itself is not really a hub, but there was a newspaper in Buffalo, and I have always wondered about it. Funnily enough, I never thought there would be there would be a forum to discuss this. He spends tens of millions, or maybe upwards of $100 million to acquire that newspaper. And there are literally only two newspapers in that town, and they are battling for, obviously, like you said, they're both battling for advertising market share, let alone the fact that they are carrying news. When you look at a situation like that, I know media is prevalent now, but India has been home to lots of businesses, lots of tier 2 cities. Take Kanpur, Meerut, Indore, Bhopal, Mangalore, Mysore. In spite of all of that, somehow segment-based niche media is one, but smaller town newspapers haven't caught on as well. I don't know. Do you think it's because of lack of demand, or because of a lack of enterprising mindset?
No, I would say lack of demand, right? See, again, with the hypothesis that the media businesses are run by advertiser money, the advertisers will spend for the segments where they see the largest revenue opportunity. And the largest revenue opportunity typically, or I would say so far in India, has existed in the metro or the tier 1 cities, and not so much in the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities. So even if you are the number one newspaper in a tier 3 city, the advertisers haven't yet seen that market opportunity to go and advertise in that leading newspaper. That is changing, right? That has been the case so far. It is changing, but the change is essentially that the kind of media that we are used to has also changed in that meantime, right? Now there is no concept of newspaper.
Right.
People are consuming content through different mediums, through different mobile apps that have come up. So now those are the platforms for media for these tier 3 cities, and that's where you will see a lot of startups getting built which are addressing to tier 2 and tier 3, and that's where the advertisers are spending.
Interesting. So, when did you decide to move on from 9.9?
Yeah, so this was in 2011, and it was a conscious decision along with the co-founders. This was an opportunity that we had decided when I was coming in as well, that hey, this is a 2 to 3 year journey where I come in and I learn a lot, but I also contribute to building a certain line of the business. And that way I've been really, really privileged to have the founder, this Pramatraj Sinha, who was the founder of 9.9 Media. I would contribute a lot to him for helping me get into the B school in the first place. He was the guy who helped me with the application. He was the guy who gave all the recommendations and guided me to get into the B school in the first place.
I see. And then Stanford happened.
That's how Stanford happened. And again, if you are, I'm sure there'll be a lot of young entrepreneurs in the room who are thinking about what their career is. I would definitely recommend, if you want to learn, if you want to be at the heart of entrepreneurship, definitely spend a few years, if possible, in the Bay Area. Very, very different kind of learning and inspiration that you get, and you can always.
And then that's where the rental startup that you spoke about, there is still, the funny thing is, outside of automobiles and homes that you talked about, which have always had a market, the US lifestyle itself has, take people who live in cities like Chicago, they live in cities like Seattle, they still own boats, they own pontoons. And it has, I guess, because of the number of financial options that are available, most people have chosen to actually either lease or purchase boats and very rarely rent it out. I personally know 4 people who all owned either a boat or a pontoon, and they would only, while just like how gym economics work, about 85, maybe 90% of the people don't even take it out for a ride a couple of times, or maybe 3 or 4 times. But other than that, the remaining 10% do. But the remaining 90% look at them and still decide they're going to own one instead of actually renting one. I'm amazed that kind of startup never really took off there.
No, yeah, but I think there are two very fundamental changes that are happening, right? One is, I think there is more and more percentage of people who are moving away from this concept of owning to a shared economy. It's happening around the world, right? Even right now, if you look at closer home in Bangalore as well, you will see the percentage of people who are owning homes versus renting homes. The percentage of people who are renting homes increases every year. People have lost that charm that, hey, I need to buy home at a certain age. So that's one fundamental shift that is happening. And number 2 is, US is such a large market that even if you're looking at a fraction of the market, it's still large. So to give an example, when we started Rentseal, we were focused on just one vertical. We started with one vertical. That vertical was party supplies. People who are organizing parties for their kids in the US and just renting for that party supplies. You'll be shocked to hear the size of existing market back in 2012, 2013. It was more than a $20 billion spend in the US just for party supply rentals. It is 2 times larger than the market that we are operating in right now, which is health insurance, entire health insurance market in India, which is $10 billion. So US as a market is so large that even if you pick a very small niche, is still large.
Absolutely. And the fact of the matter is, there's one part of building in the US, which is it's definitely expensive to build a business. There is no question about it. But then there is the other balancing angle, which is that the size of the market itself is very large. There are far few impediments to actually build one if you know a game plan and you know how to actually pull that off. You're absolutely right about that. So couple of years, and how far did you get? What sort of traction, what sort of growth did you see?
So we started, we picked one vertical, which was the party supplies. We launched in one city and expanded to around 5 cities in the same area, around the same area. We got to a few $100,000 in terms of revenue per month. So I think we were, in terms of revenues, in terms of growth, we were making great progress. There were two challenges. One, we didn't have a line of sight of, is this a profitable business that can be built in the next few years, given the cost of acquisition that we were seeing? And number two, we failed as an entrepreneur to raise money to build it, to scale that business at a much faster pace. We were running it like a bootstrapped business. And we were founders. We were first-time founders. We were, and two of us were essentially H1, not H1B, sorry, the student visa, the F1 or F2 visa holders, where the visas are also going to expire. And we were in this, we were figuring out, we were like running month to month that, hey, what do we do if we don't have cash, right? It's one is, if we don't have cash, and two, if we won't even have visa, and we can't legally stay in the US after a certain period of time. So I think we panicked that, hey, this is not going to happen, and let's figure out something that can help us be in the US and run our home.
Wow. Imagine walking away from something like that.
Yeah. No, it was a very, very hard choice. So for around 4 months, we decided, hey, let's we'll join a company and we will do something. We'll keep running this in parallel. So for around 6 months, we did that as well, which is we are doing a full-time job and we were running this in the night. And then we figured out, hey, you can't build a company like that. You can't build a company if you're spending, let's say, 10 hours of your night. It is impossible.
Yeah, you're not really productive here or there.
Correct.
Okay, and then it was more of a sort of a personal decision to make sure you started something.
That's correct. So I think the decision was that, hey, I have to get back to building and get back to building a startup. And given the experience that I had with building Rentseal, one of the things that was playing in my mind was that, hey, I don't want to go into this visa hassle anymore. I want to, when I build something, I want to remove that uncertainty from that equation. So it's better to go back to India. Even you're actually I removed two uncertainties. One is the visa situation, and the second is it's much cheaper to live in India, right? I can live in India for 3 years, 5 years without a salary. And that same amount of money will probably be enough for just 6 months or 9 months in the US. So you're giving the same amount of money is giving you a much, much larger runway in India.
Definitely. Although Bangalore is now knocking on the doors of Bay Area's expensiveness, that is, I honestly in the last 3-4 years, I have bumped into literally hundreds of entrepreneurs, um, and the ability to live on, I wouldn't exactly call it a shoestring, maybe we'll call it a size of a rope, a budget, and live for 3 or 5 years in India essentially is a blessing and a curse. So the blessing part of it is that the pressure is not so enormous to actually make the ends meet, which is one thing. And perhaps you also have family here in some form or shape that can act as a safety net to the extent that it can. So that's the blessing side, and maybe it'll give you a longer runway because you very rarely have a situation something works out in 6 months, 9 months. If it does, it's just a possibly a perfect storm of external circumstances and your preparation that's coming to your aid. But more often than not, the situation is you need that 2 or 3 year runway where you have to figure out a lot of things. There, what I have seen is that the ability to actually stay on that small or whatever that pot of gold for 3 or 4 years, in a way, can also lead to a lot of what can I say, inertia. I can easily tell you 40-50 startups which are led by founders which are literally in limbo for the last 4 years. The worst thing that can happen to startups is you neither grow nor die, right? So it gives you that loose sense of or a false sense of security, saying that, hey, I've got time, and I've seen that. I still remember a friend of mine having attended Sabir Bhatia's talks in the Bay Area those days after he sold Hotmail, and he was asking him, dude, why did you start this? What was going on in your mind? He said, I was a student, and as soon as I came out, or rather, I was visualizing the kind of things that were going to hit me as soon as I graduated. The student loan, the daily bills, and all the other things. And his response was, I have to build something where I have to jump past all of these. So in a way, the unforgiving nature of that economy acts as sort of a, I would say, it's a stick in a way to actually poke you and then push you to make something work faster. And but if you know the game that you're playing, because usually great companies and great ones have all go through ups and downs. They take, like a well-cooked meal, they take some amount of seasoning, and I suppose that opportunity exists.
Very rightly said. I think that's a point that 99% of the people forget. But you're very right that hey, don't use this as a false sense of comfort that hey, you have money and you can wait for 5 years for something to cook up.
Yeah, I know. I actually feel sorry for all of them when I see them, because growth is the one thing that can actually change. And I want to touch upon one aspect you spoke about just a few minutes ago, which is the bootstrapping part. The startup that I have co-founded right now, which is Vouch, which is a digital escrow platform, we're at that point right now where bootstrapping will not work anymore. There is early stage traction, but the number of requirements that are coming in left, right, and center from the market are so different that can we build it in the bootstrap manner? I think we can, but we will be doing a great deal of disservice to the product, the opportunity, and our own time in terms of how we are building it. So I totally agree with you there. Unless there is an angle where you're able to build an old world business and sustain it, where it, in some sense, it's literally a trading business, right? So it doesn't require vast tracts of investment. So yeah, only a seasoned entrepreneur can understand what I'm talking about. So awesome. And then you said a few things when you decided to start Plum, or rather while you were in the ideating phases. One is you wanted to stay busy and excited for the next couple of decades. That was one. And it should be a large enough problem and a startup that makes an impact. This sounds very idealistic. I have heard people really, in a sense, I've never heard anybody say these things while they're building something. Um, Given the amount of revisionist retelling of story and history that happens in our world, I've always heard people talk about this in retrospect. They go back and revise why they even started, and then say, okay, we wanted to stay busy, we wanted to build something big, while all along it would have been something for survival. But this is interesting. So talk about that phase. Where did you even get these notions of building something that makes an impact? You can always build for something large enough, but impact need not necessarily be a part of the equation.
Yeah, I think it's being driven by, I think, both of our personal experiences, Saurabh's and mine experiences, that, hey, we have tasted different kind of opportunities, be it building a failed startup, be it working at a large company. And we had certain ideas of what we get out of each kinds of these opportunities. That, hey, if I continue working at Google, I know I'll be able to have a large impact, but there is something missing here. Versus going and building something on my own, there I may be able to satisfy some of the things that I want, which is, hey, I want to learn how to build an organization. I want to, let's say, build some personal wealth, or maybe I want to build some fame, but then I'm not getting impact, right? And I think out of these experiences, we had realized that, hey, what is important for us in the next phase? And this is a discussion. And see, so that was one part. And the other part is, both of us have had multiple ups and downs with our past co-founders. And we had decided that, hey, in this journey that we take, what we are building can evolve over time. But it's more important that we as co-founders agree on some of the basic principles of why we are building. If you are on the same page of why we want to build a company, then the what can evolve over time, but we'll always go back to the same basic of why, and we will be able to agree because we are using the same principles. So we had very explicit discussions on those whys of why we want to do this. Got it. So we had very explicit discussions on those whys, and that's how we came up with these principles. That, hey, this is what matters to us. We have to create impact, and ideally this is the last thing that we are building, and we don't have to go back to the corporate world or building something else.
Yeah, I know going back to the corporate world can be a big motivator, or not going back to the corporate world can be a big motivator. As someone who's had somewhat of a similar background as yours, having a professional career and doing a startup in between, and coming back and having professional career interspersed, I can relate to a lot of what you were saying. And then how did the idea or the opportunity itself for Plum or group health insurance come about? Looks like, at least I'm getting a sense that you had a very methodical approach to it, because one is you had all these guiding principles, busy and excited, which means it should be something complex enough that must compel you to, that must excite you, must look inviting. I mean, insurance for a lot of people can be as boring, but if you're building something in that space, as one builder to another, I can definitely agree that it will sound exciting.
Yeah, and it was a space that both of us had zero experience, and we are two people who had never ever touched insurance in the past.
Okay.
So our I think we did three things. One is we had our own personal experience building companies, and we had some idea on what are the problems that founders face or people leaders face in terms of building companies. So we had some idea of, hey, we want to solve this problem of building really high quality health insurance and health benefits. So that was one input for us, which is our own experience.
But how did you zero in on the
Number
health
two
insurance segment per se? Talk about that part.
Yeah. So we had a very broad idea that, hey, we want to do something in the people benefits space, and we touched upon many different aspects of people.
Any
benefits.
particular reason
So that
why
was a very
people
broad
benefits?
idea. I think, and these are two very different answers. Saurabh was coming from a world of Freshworks, and he had seen the company scale from around 200, 300 people when he joined to around 2,000 people company, and he saw how important and how broken is the benefits piece, and how impactful that can be if done right. I had, while building Hypertrack, we had thought about doing, in the entire life cycle of building a team, you need HR tools or different kind of HR tools, and you need to think about the people experiences, including benefits. And the realization was, hey, there are 300 companies in India that are building HR tools or payroll tools, more than 300 companies. But no one, when you have to think about health insurance or health benefits or people benefits, there's no one. You have to go to a very old insurance broker or someone to get it. And most of the times, if you're a small company, you would never be able to set up a health insurance program in the first place. So those were our experiences. Number two was to actually narrow down on what we are building. We thought, hey, let's not go by just a single people problem, that, hey, if I have this problem doesn't mean that thousands of other people will also have that problem. So we spoke to close to hundreds of founders and people leaders in India to narrow down on the problem and narrow down on our hypothesis as well, that, hey, are we building something that is more common in India as a problem? And we saw most of the people resonated with the experience that we had. And number three was, we spent a lot of time understanding the evolution of the industry itself. And given that we were the two outsiders to the industry, we had no clue. So we couldn't ask very first principles kind of questions to an insider as well. We flew to Bombay and met all the leaders in health insurance space, for example. And that's how the thesis got built. So our three core thesis was, hey, number one, India is going through a fundamental shift when it comes to health insurance adoption. And we have a very small adoption right now, but in the next 10 years, India will be at a place where almost everyone will have health insurance, very similar to how US is, or very similar to a lot of European countries or Asian countries are. Health insurance will become as essential as a roti kapda makan in India. Our thesis number two was, we are not a rich country where people can afford health insurance on their own. Very small percentage, not more than 10% of the population will be able to buy health insurance on their own. So you have this 1.3 billion population that needs health insurance. The government has said that, hey, we will do Ayushman Bharat for 500 million people. So now there is this middle India who cannot buy on their own, and the government won't support them. How do they get health insured? And there, our second thesis was, employer-sponsored health insurance is what will drive the adoption of health insurance in India. And if you actually reflect back at any country that has gone to that 100% kind of penetration, a largest percentage of that has happened through the employer-sponsored health insurance. You have lived in US and you would have seen how prevalent employer-sponsored health insurance is in the US, and it has happened in most of the countries as well. So that was our second thesis, which is the largest segment of the market will be employer-sponsored health insurance. And our thesis number three was, all the companies in India that were building anything around insurance were focused on either the motor insurance or the retail health insurance. So be it Policy Bazaar, very focused on life, motor, and retail. Star Health, very focused on distribution of retail. Digits and Accos of the world, very focused on retail and on the experience side. But no one was really solving for the employer-employee health insurance, which requires different kind of solutions, which requires how do you think of smaller companies and making it accessible for smaller companies? How do you think of making it affordable for companies as small as 5 employees, 10 employees? How do you think of the user experience, not just for the employees, but also for the HRs who are managing their insurance? So that was our thesis of how we started, which is our own problem, expanded to hundreds of HR leaders, and then expanded to, hey, what is happening largely in the market?
Seems like I think this is a global opportunity, if you ask me, because there are MSMEs globally, and if you take all the insurance options that are there in the US as well, they are take Aetna or Blue Cross Blue Shield, any of them are possibly for very large corporates. While there are thousands of large corporates that are there, but outside of them, the bulk of your, let's say there is your neighborhood furniture store, which has some employees, and because of their hire and fire policies, there is the Cobra insurance angle, which covers the time that somebody is unemployed. So I see that as an opportunity. I'm actually surprised. Let me talk about that interviewing part where you spoke to so many of them. Um, the average labor code book in India, labor study, will tell us that about 90+% of the workforce literally is first of all working in an unorganized sector, which means they're largely denied benefits. In fact, the benefit word is a misnomer in India, because most businesses have so much economic uncertainty, policy uncertainty, that you either have lifestyle businesses that are run by one or two people, where I know they possibly founded the business, but in fact, it's sort of like a parasitic relationship with the business. The business literally exists for them to run their life. And you have these 8 or 10 employees around them who literally have no future, have really no future. And I'm a chartered accountant, thank God, my opportunity is way different. But I always look at people like them and say, why do these people even work here? And why do we not have a large scale revolt on our hands in the country? And then you realize that all these three trade unions, who literally have only, I think if my memory and numbers serve me right, only 20 million people on their membership, and have held the entire country at ransom from a literal bringing in worker legislation or any pro worker and pro business legislation, right? So if workers are happy, then I get a lot of people asking questions. Why are our workers unproductive? Why do they not step up and contribute? Because they have no stake in the business, and our laws are such that, forget a stake, they don't even get any benefits. Benefits is like a bad word. And as a person who's employed 20-30 people, I can say what kind of burden it entails on the business, because the revenue side is so broken, we cannot fix that. So I'm surprised you had to go through the interview process, but anyway, you did, and then talk about the start.
But I'll give an interesting anecdote there as well, right? You mentioned that the business owners in India don't think about benefits or don't give benefits, right? I'll paint an extreme picture. Actually, in India, and it's one of the very unique countries where a lot of business owners, and especially in the smaller towns, they're not giving a formal health insurance or benefit to their employees or their contract laborers. But when something happens to them, right, if there is an accident or some critical illness and they get to hospital, most of the times the business owner, they feel morally liable to take care of that person. A lot of times the business owner will take care of the expenses of that person in the hospital, while in the hospital, a lot of times. And it's just because of how this is just because of Indian culture. You won't see that in any other country. So on paper you are right that we don't have employee benefits, but the reality is actually a lot of times the business owners do take care of the benefits or the healthcare expenses of their employees. Yes, it's very restricted to their critical illness or an accident, but they do.
I, you know, I'll share a discussion I had with a friend of mine, and because In India, you have a rainy day fund for multiple things. Right? Illness is one fund, getting kids married is another fund, and maybe buying something expensive is another fund, and maybe not something drastic happens in the extended family, that's another fund. So you have a lot of rainy day funds, right?
Yeah.
And retirement is another one. So what happens, not to mention mortgage is a recent phenomenon in India. Maybe about 15-20 years ago, people never used to take housing loans because it was so expensive. They would wait out till they would be 50, 55. They've purchased this obscure piece of land somewhere outside the city. So when you go to the US, you start earning there, you still kind of have that mindset because there's so much uncertainty. You have your 401k, you have your medical insurance, you're paying your mortgage, all those basics, roti kapda makan, are all taken care of, and but you still put away money. And my friend would ask me, why are you still putting away so much money? I said, there's so much uncertainty, dude. I don't think you understood American life. He said, your 401k is for your retirement. If anything extraordinary happens on the health front, you have your medical insurance. Your mortgage is covered. If something happens to you, the mortgage insurance covers the mortgage. What risk are you talking about? Go and enjoy on the rest of the money that you actually live on, right? But if this kind of a product actually took shape, imagine what employees could do, something similar, right?
Correct.
In fact, on one of my earlier episodes, I've shared the story of this Hindi film where Rajesh Khanna and Govinda. Rajesh Khanna is the elder brother of a wealthy family, and he's overseeing this estate. The entire estate's revenues goes to take care of his health, and then he gets thrown out of his house. All kinds of things happen. I forget the name of that movie. I've talked about it in one of my blogs as well. And I used to say that whole movie wouldn't exist if a product called health insurance existed in the country. Right? So, okay.
No, very true. Many Hindi movies that will be on that same storyline.
Right. So then that's how, and you did the study. What was the first version of the product like? When did you launch? How was it launched?
Yeah, so our very first product was targeted to a segment that didn't have any access to health insurance. So if you look at India and how the corporate insurance in India has evolved, they have all built products targeting thousands of employees or hundreds of employees. And we saw a very clear gap that, hey, if you're a company, let's say in the 10 employees to 100 employees segment, it's not about, hey, what experience you will get after the purchase of insurance. You won't be able to purchase the insurance in the first place. So our very first product was targeted to that segment that, hey, we will now provide health insurance which is accessible and affordable to companies of 10 employees to 100 employees. And we saw an we saw an instant traction there. Overnight, I think within the first few months, we got hundreds of companies that were using Plum. And we were the first company, I think, in the world, not just in India, who basically brought this transparency and real-time pricing to the world of employer-employee insurance. Policy Bazaar did that for the retail insurance, but that never existed when it comes to the corporate insurance. Corporate insurance, you have to go and find a broker, give tons of data to them, and then wait for a month or so to get some quote. And you are at their mercy that, hey, they prioritize you because you're a small company. Do they prioritize you? And are you doing enough follow-ups to get that quote? We were the first company that, hey, you don't have to even talk to us. You go to plumhq.com and give basic data, upload basic data, tell what kind of plan you want to build, and you will get real-time pricing, and you can go and make the purchase happen. And it was so targeted towards that segment, which was like waiting for a product like this, is the reason we got that kind of initial traction. And then we started building more and more segments that we go after with the kind of problem that segment had, right? So let's say now if you're serving segment of companies that have thousands of employees, they don't have a problem of accessibility because there are insurance brokers that are already going to them. They have a problem of experience that, hey, can my employees and can my HR have a great experience in terms of understanding and using insurance, and in terms of going beyond insurance to providing a better healthcare, because that is my end goal, that I want to take care of the health. Insurance is just a means to that end goal of providing a better healthcare.
Dive a little more deeper into that starting point. What did you launch first? Was it a website? Uh, where did the first sign up come from? Uh, how did that happen? And then when did you hit the next 10?
Yeah. So this is this is a great question actually. We The first 10 signups came from the interviews that we had done. When we were doing the interview, one of the very clear goal that we had was the interview should end that, hey, here is my check, and I want to buy your product today. If that doesn't happen, then it's a sign that, yeah, because most of the times you're doing these interviews with your friends and families, right? And they want to be nice to you. And especially this is an Indian culture that they want to be nice. You want to be nice to everyone. They'll say, hey, yeah, you go and build it. I like what you're building, and I'll use it. But I will use it is very different from, hey, here is my money today. So we would go into these interviews and say, hey, assume we have the product. And we will actually go and say, hey, I have the product ready. We didn't have the product ready, but I would say, hey, we have the product ready. Can I get your check today? And if the answer is no, that means, hey, we are not solving a genuine problem. If the answer was yes, then it was a sign that we are solving the genuine problem. So we had signed up customers, or we had gotten commitment from a list of customers from those interviews itself. So those were our early customers, probably the first 20, 30 customers. The next set of customers was us reaching out to our larger network. So there was no marketing or anything. It was just brute force. Whoever is in our network, Saurabh or my network, be it people that we have worked with in the past or their friends, we just reached out to them aggressively over WhatsApp. And at that time, it was before March of 2020. So the world was still open and we can go out and meet them as well. So we met a lot of people. So we probably got like the first 50, 60 customers through our own friends and network. And then we started seeing some of the snowball effect, which is these 50, 60 customers started talking about Plum in their own network. There were words flowing in the WhatsApp groups that, hey, I have heard about Plum, or hey, I just signed up for Plum and that's a great product. And I was able to get a really high quality insurance program. So we had built our website, but that website was very basic, but people still started coming to our website all organically. There was no SEO, there was no paid. We didn't start paid marketing or the Google search marketing till probably like a year and a half in our journey.
That's amazing.
This was all organic. And even if I see right now, right, if the 1,000 plus customers that we have, almost 80% of the customers are organic or from referrals. Very, very small number are through our SEO or the SEM kind of campaigns.
Amazing.
So that was the initial story for us.
But just two more questions. One is India is a family-driven society. You have extended families, very large families. You also have religious groups. You have professional groups. Let's say the Jain Association or the Plumbers Association or the Hotel Association. What stops, given the fact that many of these people are actually potentially working for all these small and medium enterprises, what stops someone like you from offering a group health insurance for people like that? Because a lot of those people don't have access.
Yeah, no, nothing actually. So it's these are all in our idea phase that he will go to. See, our larger goal is that we want to accelerate the adoption of health insurance and healthcare in India. And what you just mentioned is another way for us to achieve that vision. But we have to be very systematic in terms of how we get there. We are a small company with a limited resources. So we are very focused that he will go segment by segment. We are right now we are very focused on B2B as a go-to market. We are only, and within B2B as well, we are very focused on companies and not all kinds of organizations that you mentioned. And within that, B2B and companies as well, as I said, right, when we started, we focused on 10 to 100 employees. Then we slowly expanded to 100 to 1,000 employees. Then we have now started going after 1,000 plus employees as well. And even there, we were very focused that he will go after the tech first companies initially. Now we have started going after slightly more non-tech companies as well. And that's been our learning from the past, that, hey, if you try to do everything at the same time, you will fail, and you will fail without knowing what didn't work. So for us, it was very important that whatever we do, we'll choose one market at a time, one problem at a time, one product at a time, make sure that there is a very strong product market fit and a channel market fit, and then we do something else. But we have a very clear understanding that this market is so large, this opportunity is so large, and what we are building has applicability across all kinds of companies and organizations, that in 5 to 10 years from now, we can see everyone in India, or maybe everyone outside India as well, using Plum. But let's first get to solving and delivering a great experience to the segment that we are into right now.
Okay. Just two quick questions. What's been a great challenge until now, and what's been something that accelerated your growth path?
The biggest challenge is finding the great people or great leaders who can build this. So in the first phase of your company, you're trying for a product market fit, and that's where you as a founder or founders or the founding team has to be very focused on getting to that product market fit. There's nothing else that you're just razor focused on that. Now we are in the journey of 1 to 100 of scale up, and there what we have realized is, as a founder, we cannot scale if two of us are doing everything. The only way for us to scale is we have a set of leaders who are great at each of these things, be it building a brand, be it running performance marketing, be it running sales, be it building partnerships, and so on. And then get these people and empower these people to work in that same focused way along with each other and deliver great outcomes. So our job, and actually I'm coming from one other, I was meeting another founder who is considering joining Plum, and he asked, hey, what does your day-to-day look like? I said, hey, there are only two things that I do. One is getting the best people to join us, and number two is making sure they stay focused on what we are trying to build.
Amazing.
I think it answers both your questions on what's the biggest challenge and what are we doing right now.
It does. So Abhishek, this has been a short but amazing conversation. It was great to hear you talk about your earlier startups as well, and then what you're doing with Plum. I'm certain this is still very early days for this market. There's a huge opportunity out there. Perhaps in a follow-up interview, we will pick your brains in terms of what that new vantage point looks like as you scale more peaks, and also come back and talk about some other supply-side teething troubles that you had. I'm sure you had quite a few there. Mostly we've gotten to discuss only on the demand side. Before we sign off, anything else that you would like to share with the listeners?
First of all, thank you so much. This was very, very engaging discussion. I think we are just starting up, and I mean, I'm no one to talk about scale because we haven't even started scaling. I think maybe in couple of years from now, hopefully you and I again do this chat, and there we would have scaled to hopefully tens of millions of users that we have insured, and then maybe I can share some of the experiences on how to scale.
Certainly. We wish you the very best, Abhishek.
Okay, thank you so much, Krishna.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed listening to the show and want to help support our show, please leave us a review by visiting our website, maharajasofskill.com/reviews. It helps other people like you discover the show. I totally appreciate your support. If you're a founder or an entrepreneur or anyone interested in or working with startups, this show is where you see discussions in depth about founder stories, their playbooks, and learn more about growth strategies. Visit our website for regular updates or wherever you get your podcasts and discover more awesome episodes. I'll see you on the next episode. click on the bell icon and hit subscribe to get the latest episodes.